We do this every single Thursday. We title every Colts and Indiana Hoosiers game, hoping to point at the theme or just some sort of hope that I have for the game. The title this week for the Colts versus Bills game is pretty simple. Bills versus Colts. Please just look competent. The Colts are coming off of an embarrassing performance on Sunday Night Football. Played it in front of the whole country. Looked terrible. Only scored 13 points. 7 of those points coming off of a scoop and score from the defense. That's right. The offense didn't register a single offensive touchdown. And I've still got people in my YouTube chat telling me how great Joe Flacco is. The Colts also posted their lowest yardage total of the year on offense with only 227 yards of total offense. That's a high school number. They looked bad against the Vikings defense that, to be fair, has been good against the run this year, but was 30th in the NFL against the pass going into that game. The Colts couldn't have looked any worse in that game than what they did. The defense sure forced a few turnovers, but aside from that, the defense wasn't good. Sam Darnold only had 6 incompletions. That's like a Jared Goff number right there. And the Vikings ran for 133 yards, averaging over 4 yards a carry. The Colts looked completely incompetent on both sides of the ball. It was the worst they've looked all year. And it's raised a lot of questions about the Indianapolis Colts. Did they move off of Anthony Richardson too early? I would say yes. Can they make the playoffs as a wild card? No. Is Shane Steichen as good of a coach as we all thought? Doesn't look like he is. Will this finally be the year they fire Chris Ballard? They should, but it's the Indianapolis Colts, so they probably won't. The Colts are 4-5, and they're in the middle of just the toughest stretch of their schedule. They're about to play a Bills team that's simply way better than they are, no matter how you slice it. Better coach, better quarterback, better defense, better players, better everything. I don't care what that Las Vegas line says. The line opened at 4.5. The Colts are now 3.5-point underdogs. So the line is moved in favor of the Colts, which is kind of crazy. My honest hope for the Colts on Sunday is that they just look competent. Just look like an NFL football team. Please, that's all I'm asking for. If they go out there and they get blown out, or if they look as incompetent as they did against the Vikings, people will stop showing up to games. People will stop watching. Okay, some fans, they're going to continue to show up to games. They're going to continue to watch the Colts play football for some reason. And then the fans that are continuing to support the Colts, even though they're bad this year, they're going to call out the fans who aren't supporting them and be like, you guys are bad fans. And that's just not true. I would say that the fans that only support their favorite team when they're good, those are good fans, because you shouldn't put up with a bad product. Like you shouldn't do that. Okay, fans who go to games when their team stinks are the reason why their team stinks. Like, why are you paying for a bad product? Why are you taking time out of your day, out of your weekend to go watch something terrible? Okay, like if you went to a movie theater and you watched a movie and you left and you're like, you know what? That movie stunk. You wouldn't continue to buy tickets every single week to go back and watch it. You wouldn't. You'd be like, that movie sucks. I'm never watching it again. And then you would move on. That is how this Colts team should be treated and could start being treated if they look bad again on Sunday. Now, look, I'm not saying that they have to win to maintain interest. I'm just saying that they can't look as bad as they did last week on Sunday Night Football against the Vikings. Because if that happens, then there's just no reason for Colts fans to continue to track what the Indianapolis Colts are doing. Seriously, there will be no reason for the Colts fans to give their hard-earned money to watch this Colts team continue to look like a bad football team. It's not like there's any sort of hope with maybe Anthony Richardson becomes a better player. They're going to move on from him sooner rather than later. And by that, I mean like trade him away. See ya, goodbye. We're going to go draft somebody else. That's what the history of the NFL tells us. So there's no holding on to hope and watching the Colts for that reason. The only reason to watch the Colts is because they told us that they're trying to win right now and that they think that they can make the playoffs with Joe Flacco, right? Because they wouldn't have made the switch if that wasn't what they thought. So if they look bad again, someone please explain to me why they'd want to go watch or pay money to see an aging, struggling Joe Flacco, an aging offensive line, and a bad defense. Like why would somebody want to pay to go watch that? Watch the game on your couch. When it gets ugly, change the channel. That's what I would do, but I'm paid to talk about the Colts, so I'm going to have to sit through those probably horrific losses. The Colts need to look competent just to keep fan interest alive. They can lose, right? But if they lose 27-24, right? But they lose because there were a couple bad penalties. They caught a couple bad breaks, but they looked like a good football team. Then, like, fans would be upset because they lost, but there would still be enough belief in, hey, if we beat the Jets and then we finish the year strong with one of the softer parts of our schedule, we could still make the playoffs. But if they go out there and they fail to register an offensive touchdown again, and they fail to register 250 yards of total offense again, then fans will be done, and they'll turn their attention to the Indiana football Hoosiers, right? Because that is actually a good product. Like that is a product worth taking 3 hours out of your Saturday to sit down and watch, or to drive down to Bloomington and watch, because that's a good team that actually looks competent every single week, unlike the Indianapolis Colts and how bad they looked against the Vikings. Okay, so they need to look competent for their own sake on Sunday, and for mine, because I want the Colts to win. I want them to be good. I'd like to be wrong about Joe Flacco. I don't think I am, but we'll see how it goes. Speaking of Indiana, they're playing Michigan on Saturday. Big game, right? Indiana needs to stay undefeated. They go 11-1 with a loss to Ohio State. Like, they could still get in the playoff. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what the other teams do. But Indiana just needs to keep winning. Just win out. Just beat everybody, and let's not worry about it. This is an interesting matchup for Indiana, just because of the talent that Michigan has, and that has inspired our title for for Indiana versus Michigan. It is Michigan versus Indiana, the first team with talent. Michigan. It's the most talented team that the Hoosiers have played all year, outside of the quarterback position. Since 2020, Michigan has only brought in top 15 recruiting classes. That's a net rating between transfers and freshmen. Michigan is going to be the first team Indiana has played all year that has the talent and the players to physically match up with IU. Okay, Nebraska, outside of that 5-star freshman quarterback, not as talented as Indiana. Washington, not as talented as Indiana. Michigan State, definitely not as talented as Indiana. Okay, Michigan, they're 5-4, right? And they're obviously disappointed coming off of, a national championship season. But when you look at their schedule, you see 5-4, it's like, oh, they're not very good. But then you look at their losses. The worst loss of the year is against Washington on the road. And as we've seen, teams have really struggled with the long travel, either, from Indiana or Ohio or Ohio or whatever, out to USC or Oregon or Washington or whatever. So I don't really view that as a bad loss. And then their other 3 losses are to Oregon, the number 1 ranked team in the country, Texas, the 5th ranked team in the country, and Illinois, who's bounced in and out of the top 25 throughout the season. It's not like Michigan's out here losing to Maryland or Northwestern. Okay, like, Michigan is a little more competent than I think people realize. They can really run the ball. They're averaging 165 rushing yards a game. That's the bulk of where their offense comes from, because they have the second worst passing offense in the Big Ten. Okay, and to run for an average of 165 yards a game when teams know that you aren't going to throw the football is impressive. This Michigan team, they have the offensive linemen to test this Indiana front that's been incredibly dominant to start the season. If you don't believe me, just go back and watch that Indiana versus Michigan State game where Indiana holds Michigan State to negative 1.1 yards per carry. Okay, that to me has been the most impressive thing with Indiana. That front seven has been dominant, but Michigan, this is the best rushing attack Indiana has faced all year. Part of that is because of the talent that Michigan has up front, but they also have a ton of talent at running back as well. I think Indiana's front seven is going to be fine because there just isn't much concern about Michigan throwing the ball that makes it easier to defend the run. But still, Michigan, very talented up front. I'm interested to see how Indiana combats that, because if Michigan's able to run the football, it could be a long day for Indiana. Okay. And Michigan, look, when teams play them, they know that they aren't going to throw the football. And in the games that they've won, it hasn't mattered, right? They ran for 148 yards against Fresno State, 301 against Arkansas State, 290 yards against USC, 155 against Minnesota, and 119 yards against Michigan State. Like in the games that they've won, they have found success running the football, right? Because that's what they want to do, right? They want to control the clock and run the crap out of the ball and rely on where their team's most talented, the offensive line and the running backs. If you don't believe me, look at how often they throw the ball compared to how often they run it. They've thrown the ball. They throw the ball on average 23 times a game. They run it 36 times a game. Okay. They want to line up under center, turn around, and hand the football off. They want to push the teams around with what is a talented offensive line. Okay. And then they're going to lean on their defense to get stops, which has been a little up and down throughout the year. They've had some injuries. That's been part of it. I think this game for Indiana is going to be a little bit tougher than people realize. Okay. Indiana minus 14 points to them winning. I do think Indiana's going to win. Like Michigan's not coming into Bloomington on Saturday and beating Indiana. It's just not happening. But I do think that Michigan covers 14. Okay, teams with pedigree, they just kind of find a way to stay in games, and Michigan definitely does. Coming off the national title, also the style of which they play, run the football, chew the clock. Indiana could dominate this game and only win by 10 because they just don't have the ball a ton. Because Michigan ate up 35 minutes of the game by just consistently running the football. So Indiana should win on Saturday. I'm just very intrigued to see how they match up with the talent that Michigan has, because Michigan's very talented outside of the quarterback position. That's why they've struggled this year. Because when you're only throwing the ball for an average of like 135 yards a game, you aren't going to beat a lot of teams. So that is their issue.